Robert, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you very much, Yigal. Nice to see you.
No, it's my pleasure. So I've known you for a long, long time. How many years has it been?
Wow, at least what, 18, 19?
18, 19,
Wow.
yeah, since you moved
Yeah.
here to San Diego. And I brought you on because you have this incredible new software platform that deals with employee engagement, employee happiness. And on the Pawn Leaders podcast, we talk about leadership, we talk about culture, and how to really create that within the pawn industry.
hmm
So thank you for being on, and let's talk about what you do and how you do it. So first of all, I want to just touch up on, they heard your bio before, but how did you go just quickly from, being in TV and radio to going into dealing with company culture and employee engagement?
Yeah, sure. I've always been very interested in how the cultures work. When I was a general manager of one of our stations, I used to create the Employee of the Month program, and we had another program called Caught Doing the Right Thing, where people would nominate people because they did something great, and they would post little notes on the whiteboard, and then the person with the most notes would earn some prizes, and the person who did the nomination would earn some prizes as well. So I've always liked that to see how companies with better cultures perform a lot better, especially when you see the state of the workforce today and how much employee disengagement can cost you. There's a study that says that disengagement in the U.S. costs about $550 billion a year. So
Wow.
not having your employees engaged means that they're looking for, either they're thinking of another job, or they're just looking at their Facebook page all day, or they're trying to do the least amount of work possible, and they're not really feeling like they're part of the company, and whatever they do to improve the company is going to reflect back on them. So
So
that's how we decided.
awesome. So let's go back to that. I want to repeat that really quickly. Um, when you talk about engagement, what you said was, that the employee is looking at their Facebook page, they're waking up every day looking for another job. They might be on Indeed, they might be on Craigslist, just not focusing on making the business more money. They're focused on trying to get out or just do the least amount of possible to get
Exactly.
paid.
Exactly. I mean, there's a study that says 1 out of 5 employees is actively dissatisfied and looking for a job, and 75% of the people who quit because of their boss, and they don't even know about it. I mean, the boss doesn't even know that it was because of them. They feel that it was something else that created that decision. But most people quit because they're not happy with the way their managers are managing them, and that is really really hard truth.
Yeah. So you created a software Clarity Wave, and tell the listeners what are some things that you're seeing when it comes to, obviously, first give an intro to Clarity Wave. What is Clarity Wave and how does it work? And then we'll talk about what are the findings that you're finding on the back end when it comes to engagement.
Sure. So in the past, they used, some companies use the annual survey, and they survey all their employees. And there's companies like Great Place to Work that are really famous because once a year they publish the greatest places to work in I believe it's in Fortune magazine or Forbes magazine. And the problem with those surveys is that they're really long, about 80 questions, very little participation, they're very expensive, and there's no real value for the employee. We actually had it in my job. We did it once, and you don't really hear anything. All of a sudden you have we're a great place to work, but there's no real value back to me. Maybe the company got some value. So a lot of new companies are coming up with pulse surveys. We do the surveys, instead of once a year, we do it once a week. So you can imagine that it's like if you want to lose 100 pounds and you weigh yourself today, and then you weigh yourself in 20 years. Well, that's not very good. You want to keep weighing yourself and tracking your progress. So there's quite a few applications that do those pulse surveys. However, we wanted to take it one step further and not only give a lot of value to the company, but also give a lot of value to the employee. The way we do this is that some of the questions are focused on the company. For example, like, do you think let's say, your pawn shop, do you think your pawn shop has good values and communicates them well to the employees? That's a company question. Do you think your pawn shop is a psychologically good place to work in? That's another company question. But then you also have questions about the people you work with. So how do you think these people are in terms of honesty? And then it'll show you Yigal Adato, it will show you this, and Mary and John, and you get to score every single person anonymously. They don't get to see who scored them, but now when you log into the application, you get to see your own scores, the way the other people perceive you. So what this does is for an employee, the first time they see their score and they see, for example, they scored a 5 in credibility, they go like, oh, what am I doing that's giving me that 5? Everyone thinks I'm not a very credible person. So they start taking steps and trying to improve upon that particular dimension. Let's say respect. We have a lot of cases where people are found to be believed or perceived as being very disrespectful. And after a few months, they start improving those scores because they start figuring out, okay, maybe I'm snapping at people. Maybe I'm being rude. Maybe I'm telling some off-color jokes that people are not appreciating. And when it comes down to rating me, that's when they're giving me that score. It's kind of like your Uber driver. If the car smells, like a body odor, you're going to give them a bad score. it's exactly the same thing.
Happened.
Now we're rating everything. You have Yelp, you have Amazon. Everything is about rating. So that's the real value that we provide.
Awesome. So tell me some of the biggest findings you guys are getting when it comes to employee engagement, company culture on the back end. I want to know the secrets, right? Like the deep down secrets of how a pawn shop owner, what they should look out for when it comes to engagement.
Yep.
What are some of the signs that somebody's disengaged, and what they can do to better engage their employees so that they don't have that turnover, because that turnover costs a lot of money.
Sure. So one of the things that you have to look out for is when people stop collaborating, stop participating in meetings. So, for example, the big problem about this engagement, first of all, it yields high turnover. My brother, for example, he's part owner of a chain of Haagen-Dazs stores in Mexico, about 24 stores, and he has a turnover rate of 100%, over 100%. This means that everybody leaves within a year, or multiple times. So every time he has to replace a person, it costs him about, I believe it's around $1,200 per person. And that's in the ice cream industry. That's pretty much, people who just scoop ice cream. It's not a high training, high skilled job. Now imagine what it costs when your VP resigns because he or she doesn't feel at home in their company. People become more unproductive. As I said, they're looking at their Facebook page. They're trying to do the least amount of work. Their disengagement is very contagious. The collaboration suffers. There's poor customer service. They start treating your customers, poorly because they don't feel like why should they like my company. It affects the whole company culture. It affects growth in the company, and they're really expensive. Replacing an employee can be around, there are some studies about 213% of their annual salary to replace that person, especially the higher up you go.
That's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me some of the things that you think from doing this that, management or ownership, the mistakes they make to create a disengaged employee. What's happening in the companies that's creating disengaged employees?
Yes, and actually you touched on a really good point because we like to say that you shouldn't ask what you're doing to motivate employees. You should ask what you're doing to demotivate them, because every person you hire doesn't come demotivated. They come really motivated. Everybody, it's a new job. It's like buying a new car. It smells new. Same thing with the job. It smells like new. You're really excited. And then boom, you start getting hit with this. And then boom, you're going to hit with this other thing. Then communication is not good. Then you start having some respect issues. Then your manager is not really praising your work. It's not really recognizing every time you're doing something good. And boom, boom, and those things start hitting you until you become really disengaged and deflated. So those are some of the things that they do. Very important, when the manager is not involved, when the manager is not recognizing the employees, that's one of the biggest or lowest scoring questions we get. When the manager is not involved in my own growth, when I feel like I'm not growing anymore, And we actually, one of the measurements we have in our software is what we call the engagement, the pyramid of need, which is pretty much like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How would, they go from very basic needs to the highest need. So we have very basic individual needs, managerial support, we have collaboration, with that we have the need belonging, and at the very top we have the need to grow. So when you have all those needs met, you don't leave the company. My basic needs are being met. I'm getting a good salary. I can take care of my family. I can feel like I'm contributing to society. I can feel like my manager is taking care of me, and not just as a job, but almost as a person as well. And I feel like I belong to a team. And then I feel like I have a growth path in that team. And I can grow wherever I want, even if it's not professionally, but I can still grow as a person. Then you're going to stay in that company forever. When we see a lot of companies where the managers are not involved, especially when the owner is not involved and they just kind of pawn off the surveys to their lower, HR people, and they don't answer the surveys, those companies usually reflect really poor scores. Whereas when you have the CEO who answers every single week the questions, those are companies with 8s and 9 scores throughout the board.
I like how you said when you pawn off the questions to somebody.
Exactly.
That was great.
Pardon the pawn.
But let me talk about something. You talked about like personal development, right? Personal growth. And I also believe that. I feel like when you're an owner of a pawn shop, when you're owner of any business or a manager, if you're not involved in the personal growth of the employee, then the employee kind of doesn't appreciate working there as much. I remember when we owned the stores and we did, GIA courses, we paid for them as long as they finished it. We did self-improvement courses as long as they finished it. So they had agreements with us where we said, we will pay for the course, but you have to finish it. If you don't finish it, you end up paying for it.
You end up paying it. Exactly.
So we wanted them to grow personally because we knew that if their family life got better, if their personal life got better, they'd work much better in the store.
But not only that, when the manager is disengaged, then it's contagious. It rolls down. So why am I not getting groomed to grow? Because my manager doesn't care. He's already looking for the next opportunity to jump. So it always comes back to, from high to low.
Yeah. And also sometimes managers keep the employees down because they're afraid that a great employee might take their job. Mm-hmm. So they disengage on purpose. They sabotage on purpose.
Or sometimes they absolutely, but sometimes they don't feel like they want to be like a grooming place for their competitors. Some companies, a lot of people with no experience come in, they learn, and then they go to a better, higher paying job because you kind of prepare them for the next opportunity, and that's something that scares people as well.
Yeah. So do you think, and this is my opinion, and I think, and I'll ask you yours, I believe management should essentially be a coach.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Be able to coach employees to become better employees and better people and to grow. So if there's a pawn shop owner listening to this, if you're just going to promote a great salesperson into management, it's a bad idea. They have to be great coaches as well. Do you agree with that comment?
One of the biggest problems, and absolutely I agree, one of the biggest problems you have is when you take a salesperson that's just killing it out there and they're really, really good at selling, and you turn them into a manager. Usually they suck because they are really poor time manager. They're really bad at time management. They're really bad at goal setting. They're good at their own goals, but they're not really good at, and they're really bad at coaching. And just as you said, every single manager that succeeds is a manager that mentors and that really looks for the best in others. We have a case, for example, in a law firm in Las Vegas that I use in my presentations. She had really, really bad scores. Her respect score was like 3.75 out of 10. And you look at her scores now, 3 years later, which means they didn't just fire her. And she has like 8.2, wow. 8.3, and she's still in the company. And when I asked the CEO, because he's a buddy of mine, what did you do to get her there? Why didn't you just get rid of her? It turns out that she was working for a team of lawyers that were really, really high, very, very strong personalities, very type A personalities, very aggressive. And she just wasn't, she was snapping back at them. They were yelling at each other and she was not taking it from them. And what they did is, instead of getting rid of her, they moved her to the front desk. Very, very gutsy move. You're moving someone with a low respect score to be the first face they see when they come into your company. And now she's thriving because she's in a place where she gets to meet other people. She gets to really represent the brand. She's not dealing with all the office politics, and everyone likes her. And the scores reflect what everyone else perceives about her. And that's you didn't have to get rid of a good employee. Sometimes you may have like a really good salesperson that has the worst in identity. They have the worst respect. Why are you keeping them in your company? Is making money a lot better than having a good culture? It depends. Some companies will say, yeah, I'd rather keep my stockholders happy than to have my employees happy.
We had something like that happen where we had the number one sales guy who essentially was a bully. He was a big, big bully. And it took us, 3 weeks, me and Morris kind of like fighting back and forth. What are we going to do? And we let this person go. And you can just see like everybody like took a deep breath, like, oh, finally this guy's out. And what happened was everybody else picked up the slack and sold what he was selling.
Yeah. So one thing we have is because the whole system is gamified. Every time you answer a survey, you earn points, and then those points you can trade them off for some goodies, whatever the company wants. They manage their own store. We just give them like a shell of a store, and they can manage it with a lot of free prices or cheap prices or more expensive prices or whatever. However much they want to spend, but one of the attributes of the system is that every single day you can go in and you can answer 2 questions. How do you feel today? And how do you perceive the climate? Every single day, and you get 20 points each time. It's not a lot of points, but some people really do it every day. What this does is it allows you to do exactly what you were saying. You can see a trend, especially when you move one manager. Let's say you have 15 pawn shops. You can move one manager from one place to another and track exactly that movement, change the overall mood of the company, of that location, and the overall perception of the climate. So you can see, for example, it happens a lot in accounting departments, in finance departments. You can see that every quarter, the tension goes down. Like the tension actually goes up. The overall climate goes down because it's the quarter end close. And every time they feel like they're being overworked, they still have to do their daily stuff, but they have to close the quarter. And at the end of the year, it really goes down. So if you're seeing those cyclical things, bring in some temps. Invest a little bit in helping those people so they're not overwhelmed every 3 months. And you can see those trends, how they go up or down.
Well, you reminded me of something. There's times in the pawn shop where it's, Valentine's Day, big sales, big amount of stress, Christmas, back to school. And what we would do is we would pay for people's lunches. We'd say, don't bring lunch the next 2 days. We'll get pizza, we'll get Chinese food. Or we would say, hey, whoever wants to go to this concert on Saturday night, we'll pay for the ticket. Or we're going bowling on Tuesday. And what that created for us was that release of tension, and it increased the good climate within the company. So they could have said like, man, we're working like crazy. The pawn counter is super busy. Sales are going insane, but man, I got free lunch today.
Yeah.
And so that put a smile on the people's face.
Sure.
So just doing little stuff like that as well helps, and just thinking about your employees. How can I help them to make today better, even though it's a little bit stressful?
Exactly. Another very important thing is when you make people part of the solution and not just, ram it down their throats, it's a lot better. People like to implement their own ideas. We have a whole section where people can make public suggestions, and pretty much like a suggestion box, except without all the chewing gum from everyone just throw it, thinking it's like a trash can.
Trash.
Yeah, this one, when you suggest something and it gets approved to be published, people can start voting on the suggestion. So some people will say stuff like, we want an espresso machine. Okay. Some others will come up with a process that they can improve upon in a certain way, and people will start voting on them. And then once the ones with the most votes, of course, go to the top. And then management can decide, okay, this is a very viable suggestion. Let's take it. Let's turn it into a reality. And you can change its status from, being open to being approved. So imagine when you see that something Yigal Adato suggested now is approved, everyone sees that it was your suggestion, so you get the credit, you get to feel good about that, and the whole company benefited from that. So everyone being part of that growth is like everyone is rowing in the same direction. The boat is going really fast because everyone knows exactly where they're going.
And I want to say something to the people listening. A lot of times, as pawnbrokers, we think, oh, $100 an espresso machine or $500, whatever it costs. I'm going to pay $100 in coffee a month or water, or you think negatively. You think, oh, I don't want to spend the money. But if you're sitting on $100,000 or $200,000 of inventory and your employees see that and they say, man, I just want some coffee in the morning. Or I remember when Morris and I, we put in a water machine. So people didn't have to keep on bringing bottles of water.
Sure.
Or we actually did this once and it was very, very cool. We just bought granola bars from Costco and we put them out and we would say free. If you need a granola bar, take one. So what that caused was if somebody was starving, if they forgot, they got out of bed late and they flew to the store and they didn't have breakfast and their lunch time that you scheduled for them is at 1 and they started for 9. All they're going to think about, Robert, is food.
Yeah.
So we put out some fruit and we put out some granola bars and they were super happy about that.
Yeah. When you have people that are hungry, hungry and angry, that's the worst. Either when they're tired or when they're hungry, that's when people are the grouchiest.
Yeah, for sure. Love it, man. So this has been incredible. I think that for me as doing the podcast, one of the biggest things I want to put out into the industry is for pawn shops to create a better culture. And I believe that culture is created when you find out what your people need, not what you assume they need. And I think that Clarity Wave is an incredible way of finding out what they need. Not just that, but the other hand is where people can self-assess others in the company to say, hey, my manager's acting like, he's I don't want to say the word in case someone's listening, but he's mean. Yeah, he's rude. Or, this guy, Joe Schmo is really, he's being a bully. And we self-assess. And if you're being a bully in the pawn shop and you get all this self-assessment, you get a score of 3 out of 10, you might go home that night and say, man, yes, I want to continue being this way. And so that guy's got to go. Or that person's going to walk into your office and say, hey, I got to score a 3, boss. What do I need to do? Like, what am I doing wrong? So I think that's brilliant. And I do think that pawn shops need to check you out. Where do they go to find you and the software?
Yeah. So they go to Clarity Wave. So it's CLARITY and wave like an ocean wave, because every week you get waves of clarity. So
nice.
ClarityWave.com. We actually have an ROI calculator that if you input your numbers, how many employees you have, how many and how much turnover you have, etc., it gives you a real number of how much it's costing you to have disengaged employees. And the number is, I'm going to venture a guess, but at least 10 times more than you think.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see hundreds of thousands of dollars for small companies, just what it costs in absenteeism, what it costs in lower productivity, what it costs in all those things. And it's really, if we can just improve 1% each of those metrics, poof, you're saving so much money and the system pays for itself immediately. And the system is actually very affordable.
Yeah, no, I saw the pricing. And if you go to ClarityWave.com, you can see the pricing. It's actually very affordable per user. I recommend it. And I know who you are and I know what you do. You're a man of integrity. And I know that the software system is going to be incredible on the back end. If not, you wouldn't put it out. So
exactly.
Awesome. Robert, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you. For those listening, thank you for listening. And if you want to talk more about what's going on in the pawn industry, go to the Pawn Leaders podcast community on Facebook. Or if you want to have a conversation with me, it's a free conversation just to see how you're doing in the industry and in the business. Go to pawnleaders.com. And I can't wait to see you guys on the next episode.